Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 16 of the I Thought I Knew How podcast. This is Anne Frost, and I am your host. I am really excited to bring you another interview episode this time. Next week, I will be doing a more normal / typical episode for the podcast. I will finally have some time to sit down and write up my thoughts about the experiences that I had at Shetland Wool Week. But for now, I would like to bring you an episode with one of the teachers. Janette Budge teaches various aspects of Fair Isle knitting during Shetland Wool Week. And this was actually the first of 3 interviews I did while I was in Shetland. So you'll hear that some of my questions for Janette were basic introductory level questions, but from there we went on into some of the history and psychology of the knitters of Shetland, and you'll see what I mean as we go on with the episode. Before we go too far, Janette is also involved with a group called the Shetland Peerie Makkers, which is a group that is going around to the schools and teaching the children knitting in the schools as it had been done in the past. Several years ago, the funding for that was cut off from government sources. And within the last few years, the Shetland Peerie Makkers, which means little knitters, of course, has stepped in to fill that role. However, they need donations in order to keep the program going. So if you are able to, they have a crowdfunder going on right now that should go on for a little more than a week after this goes live. And I'm hoping to get this live this evening, actually. This is Tuesday as I'm speaking. The website for that is www.crowdfunder.co.uk/Shetland PeerieMaakers. And I will have that in the show notes for you at ithoughtIknewhow.familypodcast.com. There are really great rewards for your donations. At the £15 level, you can get a pattern by Hazel Tyndall for some gloves. At the £20 level, you will receive 2 hat patterns designed by my guest for today, Janette Budge. One of them actually says it's a hat pattern, and one of them actually says Shetland PeerieMaakers around the central part of the hat. And the other one is a Fair Isle pattern that is in the colors that she designed it. It's the colors of the Shetland PeerieMaakers, and it's sort of maroon and gold and yellow. It's really like fiery and bright. I really love it. The £30 level, you can get a cotton project bag from Jameson's of Shetland that has like a graphic on the front, and on the back it has the local dialect words for different knitting terms and their translations. And that's actually the level that I donated at, because when I saw the bags in person, I thought they were absolutely adorable. But since then, I've seen Janette's hat design, and I think I'm going to go back and make another donation so I can get that pattern as well. So we'll see. There's a few other things I want to let you know about that are coming up. First of all, Morehouse Merino is going to be hosting a knit along starting at the beginning of November, as in like November 1st, for the Harriet's gloves, fingerless gloves, and mittens. It's a knit along. So if you are interested in joining in on that, you will need to buy the pattern of your choice from mrimackers.com, and then you'll want to go to Facebook and join in the Morehouse Merino flock. That's sort of the central location where Erin of Morehouse Merino hosts her knit alongs. So be aware that that's coming up. Next week I'll have an episode, as I said, about Shetland Wool Week, and let me see. That looks like all I need to get you up to date on. So without any further ado, I'm going to flip over to my interview with Janette Budge. Thanks, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm here with Janette Budge, who is a teacher at Shetland Wool Week. And we are here in my Airbnb in beautiful Scalloway. And she was very kind to come to me on a Friday evening. Thank you, Janette, for doing that.
It's a pleasure.
Great. And I am going to ask her some questions about Shetland Wool Week and Fair Isle knitting. And first of all, how did you learn how to knit? Or when and how?
Well, I can't really remember exactly learning to knit. What I do remember is getting some plastic knitting needles when I was about 6-year-old, I think, for my birthday. And it was a whole set. It was like a little bag and everything in 70s colours. And it was probably very tacky, really. And I learnt to knit that way, and I just made doll scarves and small things, just plain knitting, and that would have been my mum who taught me. Mm-hmm. But we also got knitting tuition at school from about the age of 8.
Interesting.
And that at that time was only girls who got the knitting classes, and the boys were getting woodwork. Mm-hmm. That did change a few years later. I'm not sure exactly when, but my brother's 11 years younger, and he got knitting at school.
Oh, interesting.
But when I was there, it was just the girls. But I think that meant that we got more weeks in the year, that we got knitting, mm-hmm. because we weren't splitting our time with woodwork.
Interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So would it be part of your art class to do a unit on knitting, or was it an actual knitting class throughout the year?
It was a knitting class throughout the year.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, and there was like a paid knitting teacher that went around various schools.
Wow.
And I had an amazing teacher. She was called Zena Thompson, mm-hmm. and she knitted things for the Royal Highland Show in Edinburgh, mm-hmm. and won prizes for both Fair Isle and Lace over the decades. And she knitted things. She knitted a shawl that the Queen gave, that our actual Queen gave to someone as a gift.
Oh, amazing.
When she was visiting another country.
Uh-huh.
So I had an amazing teacher.
Yeah,
and
you learned from the best.
Yes. And the way that things were done, though, was that often the rib was done in the machine by the teacher. Mm-hmm. So if it was for mittens or a hat or something like that, then that was done in a machine, a hand frame machine, and then we would just hand knit the rest of it.
Okay.
Yes. So my first Fair Isle item was little children's gloves, big enough for a toddler's hand. Uh-huh. Because I guess with that, it's a small project, and mm-hmm. there's not too many decreases and things like that. It's only the bit at the top, but the thumb is completely squint. And one of them, and but you have to start somewhere.
Did you have a choice on what you knit, or was everybody learning how to do gloves at this time?
I don't remember, but I think that it was like that. I mm-hmm. think that because it seemed to be that there was a set thing that you did each time, and mm-hmm. because I did a cockleshell scarf when I was about 9, and I really enjoyed that, because you would do this, it was either 12 or 15 together, and it, like, all these stitches disappeared. But really my first love is Fair Isle, because mm-hmm. I love playing with colour, and there's more opportunity to do that with Fair Isle than there is with lace. Having said that, I've done a few scarves and shawls mm-hmm. As well that are more of a lacy nature and put lots of colours in. Yeah.
So when you were taking the knitting classes in school, did that go all the way through school, or was that just for a certain amount of years?
Just for primary school, so from about the age of 8 to 12. Mm-hmm. So the last thing that I made at school was the yoke on a Fair Isle jumper. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In your experience, did a lot of people stick with it after that? Or were they glad it was done?
No. I had one of my best friends, we were talking about this, about a year ago or something, and she was saying, I just hate it, knitting that yoke jumper. and I was like, I actually enjoyed it, and uh-huh. so it just depended on what you felt about it. She actually does cross stitch now.
Uh-huh. Yeah, different things appeal to different people, so mm-hmm. That's so interesting. I would have loved to have done this in school. Mm-hmm. Actually, thinking about that, I don't know at the time if I would have enjoyed it mm-hmm. as much as I did. I sort of mm-hmm. came to it in my 20s. Yeah. I may have resisted.
Yeah. I think that as well then, because my mother was knitting at home so much at that time, she was what we would call a piece knitter, and she was knitting yokes onto jumpers that had been made in a hand frame machine. So she was always doing that in the evenings. So she would always encourage me to get my knitting out too. So and it felt quite cozy, you know, you're both sitting knitting together, the TV's on, chattering away in the corner. And yeah, so it was just something that we did. And so I think that maybe meant that I knitted a bit more than maybe some of my friends did. I don't know. I think looking back, I must have absorbed stuff just through osmosis because, you know, my mum was knitting just right from I was born. So I was just, you know, she was playing around the floor, and I must have been, you know, seeing her putting colours together in yokes and things like that. And
you just learn by watching. So when did you begin teaching then?
That was in 2016. Then it was really by accident. And so back in 2014, then I'd gone on a last minute class. One of my friends was selling a ticket for a colour work class. And I thought, well, why not? I've got the day free and I could go. And I really enjoyed it. And so then the next year I went to a couple more classes. And on the run up to 2016, then I met one of the organisers and offered to volunteer to sell merchandise or something. And she says, well, can you knit? And I says, well, yes. And she says, could you teach? And I says, oh no, well, I couldn't teach. She says, but I'm not good enough. My mum could. And then I thought my mum would never do it on her own. And so then it just sort of happened. I'd done just short classes in IT before and so put notes together and things like that, you know, going back nearly 20 years. But yeah, so when I spoke to my mum about it, then she was like, oh no, we can't teach you. What do we ken? We don't ken at all. And I said, yeah, but we only need to teach about yokes. You know, we
just
don't
one
need
thing.
To know. And she was like, yes, but I'm no expert, you know, and this sort of thing again. But when we got chatting about it, then we worked out that she'd made between 500 and 600 yokes over the course of 5 or 6 years in the mid-70s. And so I was like, well, Mum, I think you are an expert.
Yeah.
And she couldn't really have any answer for that one.
If that doesn't qualify you as an expert, I don't know what does.
I know. But it's so typical of Shetlanders that because everyone else was doing the same thing, you know, that maybe not every single friend of my mother's in the 70s, but every second household was knitting. And knitting to sell often. And if they weren't doing yokes, they were doing hats or gloves or something else. They tended to have their thing that they knitted and stuck to that because then they could knit it quickly. Rather than nowadays people are knit a variety of things. So but that wasn't the way for Shetland knitters in the 70s when I was growing up. But they would have knitted other things for their own family, but not for selling.
For production.
Yes.
You mentioned that you took a color work class, and
Yes.
I think that you're known for your color work. People admire your color work. I maybe I'm informing you of this.
Yes, a little bit.
You're wearing a lovely yoked cardigan right now.
Thank you.
And I know, maybe I should just say I admire your color work
Thank
from
you.
what I've seen posted on social media and such. And where do you draw your inspiration from when you're sitting down to plan a project? How do you decide what colors you want to use?
Well, often it's who am I knitting for? You know, quite often I'm knitting something for someone in the family or someone that I know, and I would think about what colours they like to wear and what colours would suit them. That would certainly be a thing with this one that I'm wearing, the mantilla cardigan. That's the main colour of the body from Jamieson's of Shetland. I sort of began with that, and then you can see hints of other colours like the purple, and there's a buttermilk. The purple is the zodiac. And then I just brought in other colours that I liked to go with it. And yeah, I just sort of play with
And
it.
it worked.
And it's just, oh, well, thank you. But I knitted a cowl first as a practice piece because I would rather knit something than just do a swatch.
Yeah.
And have something useful at the end of it. And that's actually the cowl that ended up in last year's Shetland Wool Week
Oh,
annual.
really?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I have the yarn for that at home.
Yeah, so that was kind of an accident thing. But yeah, so
I hear that a lot from Shetland knitters that, you know, instead of swatching, they'll just knit a hat or they'll knit a cowl. Is that pretty common up here, just to do an accessory?
I would say so.
Preparation?
Yes, and I think that that's maybe from that there was always this phrase of never sitting hand idle. This more from my mother's generation, when she was young, that they had to knit every moment that they could, because there was high poverty throughout Shetland, and it always helped if they were able to have some knitting to sell. I mean, it wasn't that they were ever hungry, because you're living on a craft, you always have something to eat, but there might have been other things that it wasn't in such plentiful supply. So I think that because we've come from that generation and grown up, that's been passed on, then people want to knit something. They don't want to waste anything,
right?
And a swatch would be maybe thought of as wasted yarn.
Wasting. Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't have anything against swatches either. It's just that's just how I've always knitted, and that's just the way that it's been. So.
Yeah. Well, I think the first person I heard talk about knitting a project instead of swatching was Hazel Tyndall.
Yes.
And then I found out Elizabeth Zimmerman also did that, well-known, knitter from the 70s. And I just loved hearing that, because I hate swatching. And mainly I grew up in a fairly poor household myself, and as you said, it just feels like a waste of yarn to sit down and just knit a square. But at the same time, I've had enough encounters with being off that I know the importance of it. But I just love the idea of just knitting a hat or knitting something else instead of.
I think the other thing for me is that to get an accurate gauge, then because we knit in the round with the double pointed needles, then knitting a cowl or something round, and then you're going on to do a yoke, then a flat piece isn't the same, if you know what I mean.
Right.
I guess we never really puddle any fair isle. So that's maybe something as well, that one of the reasons why we do it.
Figure out a circle somehow.
Yes.
For your swatching.
And it just makes it a little bit more accurate, maybe.
Yeah. So you have, speaking of knitting circles, the class, I'm very excited because I'm going to be taking your Knit a Fair Isle yoke bag class. And I'm interested in where the inspiration is obviously the Fair Isle yoke, but where the idea came from to do that little bag. Is that something that's commonly done here, that a little bag like that, or did you think of
no, I don't
scaling it down?
I mean, I've seen other knitted bags, but not yoke bags, not with ones with decreases necessarily. They'd just be more of a drawstring, a square drawstring bag. But it really was this idea as well of not doing swatches, of having something useful. So what could we make that would be something useful, that's smaller, that we could knit in the round? But I thought that something just with one star and one tree is not very symmetrical, and I like symmetry, and so I guess that's how it began. And then we used the pattern that my mum always knitted, the motif that my mum always knitted on yokes. That's what I should explain as well. In Shetland, then we never call a motif a motif. We would call that the pattern, because Shetlanders never wrote out a whole pattern. It was just, you cast on these stitches, you increase this much, and you have this motif either in your head or it's already knitted, and you just copy from a knitted item. And you would just sort of work out how many rows you might need, and I
think that's a very important point, I think, when talking about Fair Isle, especially as Fair Isle becomes more popular among knitters around the world, is they don't realize how much borrowing goes on from one knitter to the other in Fair Isle, and how established the motifs are. And how, you could be knitting a motif that your grandmother knit or your great-grandmother knit. And, someone, you might go to church one day and see someone in a sweater with a motif, and it's okay to copy that motif. It's not stealing, it's not intellectual property. It belongs to the tradition.
Because no one knows who made it originally.
Exactly.
And it's and people will make their own amendments to the pattern, and it's and they will design their own ones as well. But there's the sort of, and the tree is traditional and needed, because that's where the decreases come in.
Right.
If you don't have the tree, you need to have some other way of finding a place to put the decreases in without them sort of being too visible or, yeah.
So the tree you're talking about is sort of a Christmas tree shape. So
Yes.
it gets tighter at the top, smaller
Yes.
at the top. And because of that shape, you're able to work the decreases into the motif itself.
Yes.
And sort of hide them that way, make it part of the design.
Yes.
And then it alternates with a motif that doesn't change, correct?
Yes.
That one stays the same.
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
Usually some sort of star or sort of snowflake style thing, but there can be other ones as well. Yeah.
Janette, as you're teaching, and I feel like you're probably one of the more lucky knitting teachers just in where you live, because if someone's going to come learn from you, they're working to get here. They definitely want to come and learn here, Fair Isle knitting. But as you're teaching, do you find that there's a common issue that comes up as people are trying to learn Fair Isle, something that a certain number of people tend to struggle with as they're learning?
Well, I guess tension is one of the things that's sort of top of the list, in that when you're knitting Fair Isle, then you've got to carry your thread across the back of the stitches and getting that not too tight and not too loose.
Yeah.
You've been doing some Fair Isle, haven't you?
Yes.
So you know what I'm talking about. So getting that just right is, takes practice, but there are some tips that, along the way that can help with that. And also I think just helping to take away the fear, because when you see, I think for some people, when they see a piece of Fair Isle, that there can be as many as, say, 11 colours or maybe more in a piece, and you look and you think, gosh, I could never knit that. But when you break it down and it's only, you say, well, there's only 2 colours in one row, so the stitch is either this colour or that colour. And then that helps to simplify it. It's like, don't look at the whole item, just take row by row.
Row by row.
Yeah.
One thing that helped me, because I was a very reluctant Fair Isle knitter at first, and one thing that helped me was when I was here in July of last year, I was at the Shetland Textile Museum, and they always have people on the second floor knitting.
That's right.
Which is wonderful. I was there today, actually, chatting.
Yes.
But the first time I was there were 4 ladies there, and they were each holding the yarn a different way, using different numbers of needles. They each had their own way, and none of them were the right way, and they weren't teasing each other for doing it a different way, or it's just, if that's how it works for you, that's how it works for you.
Yes.
And so I just, I saw that, and suddenly I realized, you just have to do it. You just have to figure out what works for you and do it.
Yeah.
Because I'd been watching YouTube videos on how to do it, and I just kept finding people who were holding both threads in the same hand, and try as I might, I could not make that work for me.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I saw someone at the museum doing one in each hand, and I thought, it's okay, I can do it that way.
That's actually better, because then you don't get the balls twisted so much if you have to, catch a float in the middle of a run of stitches. If you've got 7 or something, you've got to catch a float.
Yeah.
But yeah, I knit the way that my grandmother did, which is 2 threads in one hand. But my mother knits the way that you're describing, with one in each hand. Yes. And some people don't use a knitting belt, and some people do. And it's not that, they're not knitting the Shetland way. It's just that's how they learned, and they're Shetlanders, and their mothers and grandmothers, certainly up in the North Mainland, then I know that some of them never used the knitting belt. They would tuck the long needle under their armpit or something. That would be how they went about it. Tamed
all those long needles. So what would you say to someone then who's afraid to take the leap into Fair Isle knitting?
It's not as hard as you think it maybe looks. That to just take your time and not to try and do everything at once, as in you can't get your tension right and be thinking about floats and be thinking about which colour you're knitting. Just, I think getting the pattern, the motif would be the first thing, because that's more obvious in the long run if you've knitted the motif wrongly. And then, as you go and your hands relax a little, then your tension will come better anyway. So it's trying not to do everything at once.
I
guess it's like learning an instrument. You wouldn't expect to just be able to play it just like that.
Yeah, and be perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's like, don't be too hard on yourself. Just have a go.
I think that's what I've been trying to do, actually.
Good.
So I started, listeners know, I started with the Harriet's hat. That was my first Fair Isle project.
Excellent.
And I picked it up because I liked the cause and I wanted to help spread the word. Oh. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to do that if I didn't knit it myself. The pattern is beautiful. My attempt at the pattern is not beautiful. But then I decided after that to do all of the wool week hats that have been released. And so every hat, I tried to sharpen another technique. So it wasn't until I think the third hat that I decided I was really going to figure out how to catch floats without having to drop the yarn, and so there I am on YouTube. Okay, this is this technique I'm going to learn this time. And I think my hats get a little better as I go along.
Yes,
because it's one thing at a time.
And that's a good way too, is to choose small projects to start with. That I help with, I'm a volunteer tutor with Shetland Peerie Makkers, which is our schools group, because I'd said before I got taught knitting in schools, but that was a paid teacher, and they withdrew the funding in 2010. There was budget cuts, and something had to go. So 3-4 years ago, then there was a pilot project begun to bring knitting back into schools. So there's now 20 groups across Shetland in the primary schools, and I do one at our local school, and that's what I say to the children there, is about do some small projects first. Do 3 or 4 small projects before you move on to something bigger, because your tension will improve. They can even see it within one item, that their tension changes from when they start knitting a wrist warmer to when they're finished, because they've maybe only knitted one thing that's plain, and then their second item is Fair Isle. So that's them just, we drop them in at the deep end. But they cope really well with it, and they have a choice to whether you use a knitting belt or not. The charity PeerieMaakers buys children's knitting belts for them to use in class. So it's really good, and they have the long double-pointed needles. We do have needles with ends on them too that they can. So it's their choice, and so they take it at the stage that the rate that they're comfortable with, and we try and give them as much colour freedom as they wish. We get the shade cards from Jimmison's of Shetland. They donate all the yarn for us for all the groups. So we tend to use the double knitting, because then the children's items knit up quicker with 4mm needles, and then take it from there. And so I get them to choose 2 colours, and they can choose any colours they want from the 225. It's like a sweet shop.
Yeah, that's an amazing opportunity for them to be able to do that. I saw today they actually released a new video talking about the PeerieMaakers, so I'll be sure in the show notes to link to that, so
excellent. Thank you.
The listeners can hear, and if they'd like to make a donation too. I know that they're looking for donations to help with the cause.
Yes, it's just to keep it going into the future. We have a very part-time coordinator, and we have boxes for each of the groups, but there will be things that need to be topped up as we go along, whether it's needles or other notions as we go, and graph books and things. So there's always bits and pieces that we'll need.
Go make a donation, everybody. I already mentioned that I'm going to be taking the Fair Isle yoke bag class. What else are you involved with this year with Wool Week?
I'm doing a beginner's Fair Isle, 2 beginner's Fair Isle classes, and yes, we've got 4 Fair Isle yoke bag classes and 1 knitting belt and ribbon string class. That's a new one for me. I have done it once in the summer, and that was a lot of fun. And then I'm joint organising some events as well. We've got the Woolly Thinking quiz on Wednesday night.
I'll be there too.
I hope you've been swatting up on your knitting terms, and I don't want to give too much away.
This will air after that, so if you let some things slip now, I won't complain.
Yes. So that should be fun that night. because me and Hazel Tyndall are jointly organising that, and we've got another chap who does a lot of quizzes in our area that is helping us with that
Oh,
too.
that's great.
So yeah.
Yeah, I've never, I assume it's like a pub quiz setup.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never done one. So I'm like, this will be fun.
We've got the buffet first, so
yeah,
you'll be relaxed and fed as well, hopefully.
Oh,
and
good.
We welcome people, meeting new people and put people in teams and that sort of thing. They can sit wherever they like. And,
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think that's going to be a fun night.
Yeah. So we've got that on Thursday, and then we're doing a film night in the Bigton Hall, which is away down the South Mainland. It's about 30 minutes from Lerwick, near to where I live. And the hall committee there is amazing. And they're doing a 2-course meal, and then we're showing a film called The Crofter's Life in Shetland. And it's by Janie Gilbertson and was filmed in the 1930s. So it's a black and white film. And there's a lot of footage from Bigton in the film, and right from people herding in their sheep to put them in the cruy. You maybe don't know what the cruy is, so that's
I was gonna let it slide.
The pines that you would gather the sheep into. But so it's I've seen the film, it's great, and I thought that Woolweekers would be interested in seeing it. So
fantastic.
I think at the moment it's got 3 tickets left out of 100, so we're doing quite well.
I'll let people know. I'll post something so they can fill. There's still people saying they can't find tickets, so
I know.
Yeah, yes. They need to look harder. I'll spread the word.
Well, 3's not too many, so we're happy with selling 97.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and then we've also in the Bigton Hall. Then I and 2 other people from Bigton are doing classes some of the days, Tuesday to Friday in the hall. So we thought, well, there's nowhere nearby for anyone to have lunch, so the hall is doing lunches from 12:30 till 3, and we've also put up a small exhibition of knitwear.
Oh, wonderful!
Both feral and lace knitting from Bigton knitters. That won't have be seen before at other Wool Week years past.
Yeah,
and we'll have some demonstrating knitting. I think Thursday night's the only night we've got a spinner. Spinners are harder to come by in Shetland.
Oh, really?
Yes. And so I have bought a spinning wheel this summer. There was a displenishing sale and bought this old wheel, and it was almost in one piece. There's only had one or two things. There's a chap that's been refurbishing it for me.
Oh, nice.
And it's over 100 years old.
Wow. Because
the chap who was selling it, he said he's in his 60s and it was his grandmother's.
Wow.
Yeah. So, we know who owned it and things, which is lovely as well. And she was from Bigton. So I'll have that on display too.
Have you tried spinning before?
I have a little bit. I was actually at the Unst Heritage Centre this summer. And I wasn't much use at it.
Yeah, I am not either.
Because I used to be an aromatherapist. I was hoping that because I'd used my hands for massage, then I would be able to feel the wool. But no.
Yeah.
But her advice was the lady there was just to use the foot pedal. Don't start with any fleece or, tops at all. Just spend 2 weeks just doing the foot pedal to get the rhythm. And then and then do it like, watch TV, like you're driving, you don't think about it. So your foot is doing its own thing. Yeah.
Interesting. Building the muscle memory for that. Yeah. Well, like you said with the Fair Isle, one skill at a time. It all builds on each other.
And also with the Fair Isle, then I think that doing a little bit each day, so even if it's 10 minutes, rather than doing it once a week for an hour, is much more beneficial. And that's what they recommend for instruments as well.
Right.
My daughter plays the fiddle, and they're always, saying, a little bit every day. So I think it's the same for knitting. Yeah.
Yep. Consistency.
Yes.
One of the things I really like about Wool Week is that the classes are spread out. So you were saying that you'll be doing classes in Bigton. I know there's classes is it Uredale Farm?
Uredale?
Uredale.
I know it's hard to get
that roll in there. Which is here in the Scalloway area.
Mm-hmm.
There's up in Yell and Unst that there's stuff going on.
There is, yeah.
So it's really it's not that you're coming here for Wool Week and you're just in a leisure center and a church or something. You are all over the island.
Yes, because it's the island of Walsa as well. Most of and even Fair Isle this year too.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's trips there. You can, but I mean it's only a 6-seater plane, so very few people can
can do the
there.
Fair Isle part. Yeah,
I haven't been to Fair Isle yet.
Oh, really?
But it's just I thought, well, for my family or my husband, they wouldn't be that interested in going.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to go with a knitting friend, and everybody's got or did have young children and things like that. And I think that you'd asked before, did many people continue to knit? And I have to say that I'm more unusual amongst my friends, although that is coming back. I have a group of 4 friends that we have get together at once a fortnight in the winter, and it was one of them had said, can you come and teach us Fair Isle? I haven't done it since school.
Oh.
And this year, then she entered a hat in the Coningsborough show. This is the agricultural show, and she didn't win a prize, but I'm just delighted that she felt that she could enter.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and part of the reason as well is for ones my age is that their children are going to PeerieMaakers, and then they want to be able to help them at home. Mm-hmm. And so it's like they just need a bit of a reminder, on things, and then they're off.
Feeding back up the generations.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And really, I think that Wool Week has really helped with that as well, because it gives more value to the skill that we really did not know until, even for me, it's really just 2 years ago when I went to the Edinburgh Yarn Festival for the first time. Then I could not believe how many people knew where Shetland was. Because I'm so used to going on holiday and having to explain, you say you're from Shetland and then you go, well, it's 200 miles from Aberdeen. Yeah. And you're just almost getting ready to say that, and they're going, oh, you're from Shetland, and and they either have been there or they want to go there because they're another, and I'm like blown away. Yeah. And I never knew that it was such a mecca for knitters until 2 years ago. Because we just thought, well, we didn't realise, my mother didn't realise, and that's one of the things I love too, is that with my mother joining me in the class, then, when we tell people that she's knitted 500 or 600 yokes, there's a gasp. And then my mother goes a little bit red because it's, she's just not used, no one is used to saying that the knitting is good. And that's partly because the knitwear brokers, the ones who were buying the finished knitwear, and more so maybe my grandmother's time, then they would try and find the fault with it, whether it be the colours, or there's a split stitch here, or something, so that they didn't have to pay as much, because there was quite, there was plenty of knitting around that they could afford to be choosy. And so then if you've always got someone who's criticising your work in some way, then you don't think you have a skill. And plus everybody's doing it, so it's not really a valued skill, if that makes sense.
It's not as special.
No.
I was at the Old Ha Museum the other day, and they have a display there right now of knitwear, but a lot of it's for sale.
Yes.
And also we were in, is it Tangwick? That's
Tanwick.
Far in the north.
Yes.
We were at Tangwick Ha, and they were selling hand knit scarves there.
Yes.
And I was angry. I was so mad. And you can ask my husband, because people are not charging enough for their knitwear.
Yes.
And I saw a sweater. I didn't end up getting it because I think it was going to be too small, but I saw a beautiful sweater that my daughter would have loved for £40.
Oh, that's
that was it was a plain knit cardigan, but it had gorgeous embroidery on it. I saw another vest for £45 that was full Fair Isle.
Wow.
And I was angry. And my husband was like, well, don't complain, this is a chance to get. And I just thought, these women aren't valuing their work properly.
Yeah. I there's a couple of ladies who sell during Wool Week, and I often tell them, this needs to be more. You need to be charging more. You're hardly covering the yarn. But I think that some of that is because they knitted a long time ago, and they think they're getting a lot now. I think that what we worked out for my mother knitting a yoke, I mean, someone else had done the body on the machine, and she got all the yarn given
for
to
free,
her,
right? But
she was getting £2.50 a yoke for knitting the yoke.
That's crazy.
In the 70s. So, that's just at one time. I don't know. It wouldn't have always been that, but but we sort of remember that was a figure.
Yeah.
So I mean so then if you're getting £40 now for a children's one, they think, oh no, I can't charge much more than that. If you look back to the history of how things were, then but things need to change.
No, I very much agree. Because these and even in some of the, I won't name names, but some of the proper shops in town, I was looking at the prices and just going, there's no way. I mean, some of them I think probably worked out to less than £1 an hour for the work that went into them. And
it depends on, some of them may have been machine made.
Like the yoke style ones.
But some of the all overs are machine made and then linked afterwards. But still, it's still a lot of work that goes into it, even if it is that. Because they're hand linked. That's not done on there's someone sitting at a machine hand linking that.
It.
Yes.
So trust me, knitters of Shetland. You need to go higher, and you can. It's like, I give you permission to charge more for your knitwear because it is absolutely worth more than what's being charged for it.
Well, my mother-in-law has done, just as a hobby, she's knitted some Fair Isle hats and some scarves, lace scarves, and she was saying, I said, would you like to sell them this week at the Bigton Hall? And she says, well, we can give them a try, but I have no idea how much. And I says, I'll put some prices
there
on
you
them.
go.
Because if you don't sell them, then you can always put them to the Boyd next year. That's what we would locally then, the Shetland Textile Museum is sort of known as the Boyd, and that's how I say it. Other people, if you're from the north of Shetland, you might call it the Boyd.
I thought it was the bod.
Because of the two dots above the O, then it can have the oi sound.
Okay, so it's the Boyd.
The Boyd. I'm from the west side.
Okay.
And so we would say the Boyd.
Boyd.
And we would say Muckleroy and rubber boots and all that sort of thing. That's Wellington boots.
Okay.
Yes.
Because even as you're saying, like the Shetland Textile Museum has other items for sale there too that have all been hand knit and are beautiful.
They're much better at trying to because people will come in and say, I don't know what to sell this for, and they're much fairer, trying to get a fair price there.
Because that is run by the knitting, spinning, weaving, dyeing guild. Is it not?
It's a separate committee for the Shetland Textile Museum, but there are some of the same people on that committee than as in the
thought
guild.
that I thought the guild ran
the
Textile Museum.
No,
interesting.
But many of the volunteers that
there's
demonstrate,
overlap.
Because Shetland's a small place then.
That's what I'm learning. Everyone has 2 or 3 jobs.
Yes, and if you're in one part of the knitting community, you're in another as well. Yes.
Yeah. So you gave us a few little lessons in the local dialect. Do you have any favorite phrases or favorite slang that you can share with us?
Well, I was thinking about this, and I was saying to my daughter, the one who's 13, what I was thinking to say, and she says, well, I think the one that you use the most is puddings to dat. And I was like, oh, do I say that a lot? And she says, yeah, you do to me. And I'm thinking, okay. So I'll need to explain that. So she gave me the example of, she's chopping some vegetables, and I'm saying, oh, no, you need to chop it this way so you don't cut your fingers. And she's going, no, this is how I learned it at school. And or I'm fine. She'll say, I'm fine. And I'll say, well, puddings to that then. Puddings to thee. And so it's like, well, you'll just have to do it your own way. It's that sort of
so puddings to that.
Yeah. Pudding steady down.
I feel like I say the same sort of thing to my own teenagers. You've got it figured out.
So it's really pudding steady down. Yeah, it's that kind of a phrase. But really what I was thinking of, that one that I like, that I think is a motivating phrase, is when you're sort of well on through a project, well, I've got my foot upon the neck of 'em. That's what you would say. So you're well on through your project, whatever that is, or the job you're doing. So if you're wallpapering, well, I've got my foot upon the neck of 'em.
Yeah.
You're halfway through it.
You're under control.
Yeah,
you got it under control.
And so that's a phrase that I like. But yeah, I could sit here all day, and that often happens in my house is a pays wisp, which is when your yarn goes in a tangle.
Oh.
Yeah.
We call that yarn barf. That's not so poetic.
Oh. So when I'm translating it, then, and so if I say pays wisp, then I need to say that's yarn barf. Yeah. Or the other one that's common that people speak about is spretting, which is like frogging.
Okay.
Is your frogging, so just taking back. But spreading is that you pull the needles out and you just yank the yarn.
Oh, okay.
You're not taking it back slowly.
Careful.
No. Mm-hmm. I mean, you would be careful, but you're not just taking back one stitch at a time.
Right.
Spreading is you're taking back a few rows. Mm-hmm.
I heard that there's a different word here for steeking.
Yeah, well, they just call it cutting. My mother said,
you just cut the...
Yeah, because there's actually
that's simple.
A sticking phrase in lace knitwear, and that means more to join two pieces of
opposite.
Lace. Sticking wasn't something that my mother ever used, but Hazel actually is my mother's first cousin.
Oh wow, okay.
So she said that it's in her mother's diary. Then there's her mother mentions about sticking. So her mother did use the phrase, but in lots of parts of Shetland, then they didn't speak about sticking. They just you just spoke about cutting, or they didn't really speak about it. Probably they just did it.
Yeah, it just was what they were doing.
Mean, the thing is, because Shetland yarn is so sticky, then you don't have to worry about it, spreading back, as we would say, going back on its own.
When I came here in July, but I was trying to set up a class or a lesson so that I could steek. Because I was very nervous about the idea of it, and I hadn't worked with Shetland yarn before, so I was just used to what is readily available in the States, which is much smoother and softer and fluffier. And so the idea of steeking, I just couldn't wrap my mind around it really, and it's so much easier to work with. Like I've been working my way through the hats for Wool Week, and I'm constantly making mistakes and having to pull out a spret, pull out the needles and just go back 3 rounds because I forgot to change colors. Yeah. And it's so much easier to get back on the needles because it just holds, holds itself.
The stitch, the loop, as we would say, is still there. Yeah, it's not run down.
Right.
Down through your knitting. No, it's often there.
I am so happy about that. I got about 10 inches through a lace scarf not too long ago that was with a very soft single ply merino, and was talking with a friend as we were, just as I was knitting, and started laughing, and a stitch jumped off and just instantly laddered to the bottom. And there was nothing I could do. It was all the way to the bottom, and so I just had to start over and work on that again. But I was like, Shetland wool would not have done this.
I've seen people online do these lifelines, but that was never something like I was asking my mother-in-law about that, because she didn't knit to sell. She had an office job. She's a little bit younger than my mum, but her mother worked in a knitting shop in Lerwick, and so she's had a lot of experience and been around knitting and everything. And I was asking her, had she heard of these lifelines, and she would, no, they never used lifelines,
Wow.
But she was going to be knitting something with that had, silk in the mix, and so she was thinking, oh, well, she might try that, and she could see the usefulness of it. But
That's
it was
amazing.
never a thing that people needed to do in Shetland because it's quite a sticky, it sort of grips.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you're doing Fair Isle, you can see it with the floats at the back. then you can see how the floats sort of grip the rest of the...
Yeah, that's true. It starts to sort of hold on to the work.
Yeah.
Well, I would keep you here all night. This has been very informative, and I think people are really going to enjoy it. So, but I will let you go and have a Friday night tonight. But before you do, if you'd like to share how people can find you online, how they can contact you and learn about where your classes are.
Yeah, well, I have my own website. It's JanetteBudge.com, and I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. Yeah, so just with that same
all is
name.
Janette Budge.
Yeah, all is Janette Budge, yeah.
Yeah, and she's definitely worth following.
Oh.
Beautiful pictures of lovely work.
Thank you.
So be sure to check her out. And thank you, Janette, for being here and giving me your Friday night. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I had a really enjoyable evening getting to talk to Janette Budge and get to know her before all the madness of Wool Week started. And then, as I mentioned in the episode, I was able to have a class, and I went to both the quiz night and the Bigden Hall event that Janette was involved with organizing, and all of them were really wonderful experiences, and I'll talk about them more next week. But for now, may you be blessed with stitches that never drop, yarn without joins, and plenty of time to knit. Bye, everyone.